So much goes into making music. Just not that I'm a musician, but just from everyone that I've spoken to and everything they've said, I'm just blown away by how much work. It's probably like 10% on stage, 90% off stage with writing, recording, rehearsing, jamming, also just working on those friendships and those relationships. One of the best things, when I was interviewing Frederick from Opeth, I asked him, what would you tell yourself if you could go back to your 10-year-old self looking at you now? What advice would you give or whatever? And he said, practice, 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 but also it costs nothing to be a nice person. Yeah. And I feel like that's such an important thing because if you're in a bigger band or a more popular band, or if you start doing tours overseas, I think that a lot of ego comes into it sometimes, and that can really crush people because it doesn't cost anything to be a nice person. And manners are free. I think that people really forget that sometimes. If there's only 5 people at your gig, that's wicked. They get a really cool, intimate show and you can have that crowd banter with those 5 people, get to know them and feed off each other. If you have 500 people at your show, that's wicked too. All these people have come to your show and they really want to see you. That's really cool. But regardless of the audience size, you're still there to perform and to entertain. And I think that's really cool that people would give their time to get up there on stage and to entertain, because that's the whole point of it, right?
Yeah.
Being nice to people is just such an important thing. And that's what people remember, like how you'll make them feel at the end of the day. They won't remember, oh, I got the CD. They'll probably forget about the CD or the vinyl or the shirt. Yeah. But like, it's like, oh, I got to talk to blah, blah. And he said, hey, and shook my hand. That was so cool. Like that's, you know.
Yeah, level impression. And ego is such a funny thing because usually if they're playing a show, there's a lot in their mind like, did I forget that key cable for my setup that like everything relies upon? And lots of bits and pieces. But if you're looking at a person in a pressure situation, and if they're experienced, they've been in that situation a lot, they can be comfortable in the eye of the storm. But if they're relatively new or the expectations are high or they haven't practiced enough, they could be like, you know, in a whirlwind. I always find it really hard to talk when I get off stage. You know, immediately someone's come, you're trying to pack your gear and get off stage and someone's like, hey, good, what was that? And I'm like, the place where you go in the music brain is totally different from the talking brain.
Yeah.
And it does not cross back. It might take an hour. Some people, it takes hours and hours.
That's definitely something that I've really learned a lot from speaking with musicians as well and interviewing them. I'll always ask them, you know, how do you go into that place when you're up there? You go from this person off stage having a drink or whatever, and then you're up there screaming your heart out with this crazy hardcore. How do you sort of transition? Because that just seems like a completely different person on stage. Yeah. And I'm just like, what? Like as someone in the audience, I'm like, oh my God, that wasn't that person. And a lot of people have been like, the thing with them is that they don't want to talk to people beforehand because they're trying to get into that zone. They're trying to channel those feelings. They're trying to get really like, you know, work on that within themselves so that they can get up there and produce that. And then afterwards as well, they're also thinking, oh man, that was a crap performance, or I should have done this, or did anyone notice I missed that key change, or I forgot this and my pedal board stopped working halfway through and da-da-da, you know. So there's all these things and they're beating themselves up mentally afterwards as well. So I've really learned to not go near them, just let them cool down and chill out and just relax after the gig because they've just probably sweated their ass off on stage and got hot and sweaty and just really want to like relax and calm down a bit.
Yeah.
Also, the funny thing that I've really learned is that most musicians are super anxious. No matter how many times they've been on stage or how few, they still get like really nervous before the gig. Yeah. They care so much and they want to put on a good show. And that definitely shows because they just get super anxious. They don't want to talk to anyone because they're too nervous about playing.
Yeah.
So I think that as someone in the crowd or the audience, just in general, people should really give people space as well. And I feel like that's really important.
It feels like you're looking out of your eyes, but you're really not seeing because it's like if they did an MRI, it'd be fucking fireworks going off in there. Like, the question is, you're like, half the time you're going, can I remember an hour's worth of like high-speed maths in your head? You know, you're going to like blend it all together.
Crazy.
Didn't know if my guitar was working. And then I was next to Tom and he's playing keys and that's the first time we've ever played with a keyboardist and he was kind of winging it. So I'd never heard that in there before. I was like, what if I stop? But then if I stop, I'm just going to have to assume that my guitar's, the volume knob is up and it's working and then just wing it from there. But yeah, there's usually a lot going on. The outside is quite glazed over and the inside is like, oh my God, this is fucking insane. It's a cool thing. And if you go to any green room, you know, you walk in, people are generally sitting there very quiet, trying to get in their little character, in their little zone. That's good. So how'd you get into the heavy side of music?
I've always loved it, I guess. I think that my older brother had a CD. I think it was Metallica, the Fade to Black album, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, Ride the Lightning. That's a great gateway into metal. That's the album, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I was about 14 and he was listening to that and I wanted to hang out and he was like, no, go away. I remember just like when he'd gone out, just pinching his CD and listening to it and be like, oh my God, mind blown kind of thing. And it's just sort of stemmed from there, really. But I mean, my music taste is so broad from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other. So not just metal in all types, but heaps of blues and rock. I grew up loving Kiss and AC/DC and INXS from my parents' influences. I find people really interesting. So if someone's like, hey, you'd probably really like this song or band or whatever, I'm like, okay, and I will. And then next minute, mind blown sort of thing. So like my mate Jake was like, check out Sleep Token. And I'm okay. And then next minute, I just couldn't stop listening to them for weeks.
Yeah. And you must do this heaps to your friends now as well. I think you alluded to it before. What's some bands that you've discovered on your own and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to tell the world?
While She Sleeps the other night was pretty awesome. And I caught up to my friend Patty today and had breakfast. And I'm, oh my God, you'd really like this band. It's sick. Like, have a listen. And also like some more of the local sort of Perth stuff as well, like Belgravia, the more sort of pop punk. They're really cool. And just also Nylon Stroke, I was really surprised when I first ever heard them because I went into that gig blind. Like I like to go into gigs blind sometimes where I don't listen to anything beforehand and I just sort of really want to experience the essence of it and like feel out the vibe and just sort of really get a feel for the music, how it's coming off the stage. Because sometimes you can listen to stuff, you know, it's recorded in the studio or whatever and it's like amazing, but that's all the production behind it too versus when you see it live. Yeah. So it can be really tricky. But yeah, there's heaps of bands, too many to name.
And being in Fremantle at the moment, you know, this really is a heartland of rock globally. You look at some of the bands that came out of here, including AC/DC, which is like, I mean, I went to this gig and it was like AC/DC, Metallica, Tool, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest and Guns N' Roses. AC/DC was the most popular band there by a long shot. Metallica was not far behind in terms of the lines for merch and all the, you know, but AC/DC had these red hot flashing horns. And when you look out over the crowd, there's hundreds of thousands. They're going for $20. How big is AC/DC? And then they're from like this little town here where they did their 10,000 hours.
It's really interesting, right? Because I know that some musicians in Perth are all like, oh, Perth's shit, it's got nothing going on. They've got to leave Perth to achieve anything. But I think that's such a load of garbage. And every time I hear it, I point people out. Yep. If you change your mindset and have more like an open-minded, like growth kind of mindset, like, hey, maybe we need to try this or maybe we need to do this or maybe we should try this other thing, then maybe you'll start getting more fans or start doing other shows or start broadening who you're playing with and doing other gigs and things.
Yeah.
Because Perth is honestly a melting pot. And like when I spoke to, I think it was Hanny from Black Majesty recently, he was saying he didn't realize how many bands Perth had and how awesome the scene was in Perth. And that's what I hear a lot from many of the like international artists or Over East artists I speak to. Like, yeah, I heard this band from Perth or that band from Perth. And Perth's really cool. And, you know, so it's really Perth and Freo. Like there's a lot going on and there's a lot happening. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like the internet is because it's becoming more exposure for the musicians and for the music and for the awesome things we've got going on here.
Yep.
So people that don't think that Perth's got a lot going on are probably not really going out to gigs and seeing what's going on. So
yeah, if you get like if in any city you're walking on the streets, you're probably not seeing the true action, right? You tap into the underculture and then bang, you're off on meeting people, having fun. Yeah, mind blowing, right?
Absolutely. And everyone is so lovely. If you go to any gig, everyone's just there having a good time. You make friends. Like I don't know how many people I've met at gigs that I've become really good friends with, just countless. And everywhere you go, it's just a good time and a good vibe. Like when I was at While She Sleeps the other night, the singer was saying that one of the things that he'd really noticed was how friendly everyone is and everyone was just making friends and having a good time. And I was like, that's pretty much Perth, you know, like everyone's just really friendly and happy and just glad to be there. And no matter where you go, whatever gig you go to, everyone's just really nice and really happy and really friendly. And I think that that's one of the things is a lot of people don't want to go to gigs because like, oh, those metalheads, they're so scary. But it's like, nah, they're just people.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Greg the accountant or
Yeah.
or the farm person or whatever, you know.
And typically, if you're going to say it typically, I don't know if you can say it typically, but it's sort of the same form of escapism as reading a fantasy book or playing computer games. You know, it's kind of like, all right, this is like a world that I can immerse myself in, and I can feel feelings of like if I was in Lord of the Rings, but I was an orc. You know, this is what this music sounds like, or something like that.
Now imagine going to those gigs and then getting to write about it, because that's pretty much what I do.
Is that something, you know, if you had gone back 12 months, what would you tell yourself 12 months ago?
That the good shit will outweigh the bad shit easily.
Yeah.
Because I mean, 12 months ago, I was just kind of cruising along in the same sort of pattern in my little comfort bubble. I mean, I was going to gigs, but not really. It was more just my friends' gigs and that was it, not really getting out there. But if you had told me 12 months ago that I'd be reviewing Parkway Drive at RSC Arena or any of the stuff that I've done or any of the interviews I've done or reviewing entire festivals and talking to all these people on the lineup, I would have been like, oh, no way, that won't happen. Like, that'd be cool, but that will never happen. So I think what I'd tell myself 12 months ago is probably just hold on, because like more cool shit's coming.
The best is yet to come.
Yeah.
The amount of times I say that to myself in my head, the best is yet to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's always better days tomorrow. No matter how worse a crap day you have, like tomorrow can always be better. So
Yeah. And it all started with a yes, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was in pajamas when I said yes to that gig, actually. But yeah, I mean, I could have stayed doing the same thing and I probably would still be in that little cave now kind of thing, you know, just kind of being like, why is my life crap? It's because you're not getting sunshine and going out and seeing music. You're not getting them serotonin.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's quite, I'm definitely super duper grateful to Ryan and Frank, but also to Sean and Nick from the Rock Pit as well for giving me that chance. And since I've started reviewing with the Rock Pit, that's also grown to reviewing for Serial as well. So Keith from Serial gave me a chance and I got to do some awesome reviews for Serial. So it's just kind of one of those things that when you say yes to stuff, more opportunities just open and it's just amazing. Because you just never know what's around the corner or what's going to happen. More cool shit.
So where to from now? Is this something that you can parlay into a career and you're getting into the industry?
Good question. I'm not too sure where to from now, to be honest. I'm just sort of taking opportunities as they come and really just going with the flow of it. I'm really enjoying doing a lot of interviews, like interviewing a lot of bands. I find that really interesting because people are so fascinating to me. I would love to do it and be paid for it. That'd be really cool as an actual career or a job.
Have you ever fucked up an interview?
Yes.
Okay, tell me that story.
Oh, it's so
Cringe.
So I love Opus.
Yeah.
And I loved them when I was a teenager in high school and like all my friends like, oh my God, let's get guitars and like play metal and stuff. And so when I recently had the opportunity to interview Opus with 5 minutes notice before I went into another interview, I was like, oh my God, yes, I can do this. Did my other interview that I had to do, then interviewed Opus, which was probably like one of the biggest things I've ever really done in my entire life, which I was just like, oh my God, like fangirl at the beginning. Like, I just want to say I love your music so much and thank you so much for like doing this interview and, you know, just totally spazzed out a little bit. Then afterwards I was like, I didn't hit record.
Oh no.
And my heart just sank. And I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? No, I thought it was automatically recorded because it was a business Zoom and you can, when I do my own interviews, I always set the record parameters to record automatically at the beginning.
Shit.
But because I was logging on using somebody else's details for the Zoom, they hadn't done that. They thought that I would record it manually. So that was probably like my biggest fuck up and my biggest like, oh my God.
Wait, so how do you get out of that?
Well, you can't really. Contacted the PR and they were like, yeah, we can find more time. We'll let you know. But I haven't heard yet. I understand. No, that's fine.
Oh, so you just owned up to it, Face the Music?
Absolutely. Straight away. Called the editor, said, hey, this is what's happened. He was a bit upset, obviously, understandably. But then I had another opportunity to interview this other band from America. And that was at like 7 a.m. because they're in America, so time zone differences. And that recorded, thank God. But that was just like a really difficult interview to begin with because I was just really standoffish and didn't really want to chat. And it was like they'd done 30 interviews before and they didn't want to be there doing this one and like make them relax a bit.
Yeah, if you got a 15-minute slot and you're 2 minutes in, you're like, well, they have, one-word answers to all my questions so far. Yeah.
It's really tough. So I was just like, oh, hey, what do you like to do to relax? Like when you get some downtime away from music, like what's your favorite hobbies or interests? Like what do you actually like to do to just be you and find yourself in center your balance again? And that was when she really like came in. She's like, oh, I really like doing this. I really like doing that. And like from there, it was just such a nice interview after that. But it took like talking about some nice things that she likes to do to get there. And it was, so it's just these things that you sort of learn on the fly along the way. But yeah, so those are like my
fucking roller coaster, hey?
Definitely, yeah.
All right, I'll tell you about my biggest music journey failure. So it was back in the day when you had to get a calling card to call into an international artist. And you had to dial like 20 numbers and sort of like it was just a complicated time, and there'd be like a phone hookup and a PR agent and stuff like that, right? It was just a messy time to be doing stuff internationally. And I was writing for The Drum, which is a newspaper, and it's The Music now, but it used to be called The Drum.